Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
The business of corruption is like any other.
Barack Obama is the worst president since World War II. Who's the worst president since World War II? Quinnipiac decided they wanted to ask this question. Well, 1/3 of Americans say Barack Obama is the worst president since World War II. Barack Obama is the worst president since World War II.
Wow. You think about if you're President Obama, you're trying to shape your legacy, and you're up against that where Nixon is like fabulous compared to how you're doing. And you don't want that to be how it goes down.
President Barack Obama has been a one-man wrecking crew as it relates to safe community.
We have long thought and said this president is a smart man. It may be time to revisit that assumption.
How bad has he been? Where does Barack Obama rank in your mind, you who know so much history, among the worst American presidents?
He has displaced Jimmy Carter from that position.
The worst?
The worst.
Worse than James Buchanan?
Yes.
Worse than Richard Nixon?
Yes.
All right.
Come on. Come on, man.
Like many others, I believed Obama was a new hope for a better future. If I had been able to vote, I would have voted for him. After the disaster of Bush, it seemed like a breath of fresh air, but the air rapidly turned foul. At first, I questioned myself. Is it racism that is causing me to question his ability? After all, the press was still gushing over him. Most people will go on believing the mainstream media, which continues to cover for this man. Unfortunately, it turned out he was a smug, self-obsessed career politician who should go down as the worst president of a generation. After all, the election of Obama was supposed to herald a new era, where all were able to achieve the highest post in the world, regardless of race, religion, or sex, but instead it ramped up identity politics and division. Democrats quickly pivoted to sexism when racism could no longer be used. If a woman becomes president, they will quickly move to trans or disabled. This is how the intersectionality of the left works. Let's not forget that Black Lives Matter became a force under Obama, a long time before Trump came to office. Obama continues to divide people along racial lines, recently saying white men have been brainwashed into thinking they are victims. During his first term, he went from one unpopular policy to another, until he lost Congress and the Senate. Once his power to do harm was taken away, his popularity soared. Maybe people like the idea of a charismatic black president more than the reality of it. I would love to see in America get past this fixation with race, but I don't see that happening anytime soon. So let's look at some of this man's achievements. He won the Nobel Prize in his first few months in office for the promise of what might be. Well, I hope they kept the receipt. I can't be the only one who thinks Obama is an overrated, self-satisfied, corrupt elitist. President Trump was a reaction to Obama, just as Obama was an overreaction to President Bush. Obama became the first president to become a reality star. Stands to reason that a reality star would become president.
Donald Trump is here tonight. Now, I know that he's taken some flack lately, but no one is happier, no one is prouder to put this birth certificate matter to rest than the Donald. And that's because he can finally get back to focusing on the issues that matter. Like, did we fake the moon landing? What really happened in Roswell? And where are Biggie and Tupac? All kidding aside, obviously we all know about your credentials and breadth of experience. For example, no, seriously, just recently in an episode of Celebrity Apprentice, at the steakhouse, the men's cooking team did not impress the judges from Omaha Steaks. And there was a lot of blame to go around, but you, Mr. Trump, recognized that the real problem was a lack of leadership. And so ultimately you didn't blame Little John or Meatloaf. You fired Gary Busey. And these are the kind of decisions that would keep me up at night.
we are watching in the Trump presidency is worse than Watergate.
The mainstream media often refers to Obama as the scandal-free president. But how true is this? Let's take a look at some of these non-scandals. Probably the only one that got any coverage was the Fast and the Furious. Federal agencies allowed weapons from the US gun dealers to walk across the border into the hands of the Mexican cartels. The ATF lost track of those weapons, many of which were used in crimes, including the killing of a border agent. Non-existent red lines in Syria. Non-proliferation deadlines issued to Iran, rhetorical step-over lines given to Vladimir Putin, were ignored, eroding US credibility. He weaponized the IRS. The IRS targeted conservative and pro-Israel groups prior to the elections. Benghazi, the failure of the administration to protect the Benghazi mission and the cover-up that followed. And the worst scandal, which is ongoing and could be considered worse than Watergate, Obamagate. Obama used the deep state to exonerate Hillary Clinton from serial wrongdoing and spied on and tried to sabotage the 2016 Trump presidential campaign.
Worse than Watergate.
You can also include the Pickford scandal, spying on the Associated Press, Rosengate, Salandra, violations of the Constitution, and the C-Stack affair. George W. Bush was portrayed by the media as a warmonger, whereas Obama as the great healer. But how successful was Obama's strategy? For example, under Obama came the rise of ISIS. Despite Obama's deployment of troops, doubling drone strikes and increasing airstrikes, the anti-war movement, which had been so vocal during Bush's presidency, was strangely quiet. Under Obama, America was at war for longer than under any other US president in history. US combat forces were deployed on the ground in 3 countries. That's one more war than Obama inherited. Obama has conducted airstrikes on 7 countries. That is 3 more than George W. Bush bombed. Obama had a kill list for drone attacks. He oversaw more strikes in his first year than Bush carried out during his entire presidency, a total of 563. Compare this to 57 strikes under Bush, killing between 384 and 807 civilians.
With respect to drones, that I had to kind of stop the system for a second and say, you know what, we're getting too comfortable with our ability to take kinetic strikes around the world without having enough process to avoid consistently the kinds of civilian casualties that can end up actually hurting us in the war against radicalization. What I can say with great confidence is that our operating procedures are as rigorous as they have ever been.
Yes, we came, we saw, he died.
You don't have to worry about whether it neatly fits into socialist theory or capitalist theory. You should just decide what works.
2 ways of looking at it. I mean, one way of looking at it is now that you've become more successful
through hard work.
Through hard work, you don't want to be taxed as much.
Exactly.
Which I understand. But another way of looking at it is 95% of folks who are making less than $250, they may be working hard too.
Obama has no problem with socialist economic ideas, and we can see this in his handling of the economy. He was the first president in the modern era not to achieve 3% growth. After criticizing President Bush as unpatriotic for nearly doubling America's debt, he doubled it. He was responsible for the death of the middle class in 2015. 7 years into his presidency, the middle class became the minority for the first time in living history. He enlarged the size of federal government, enlarged bureaucracy, increasing the potential for corruption. He presided over the slowest peacetime recovery in American history. After the 2008 recession, it was the worst in 50 years. And the amount of Americans under the poverty line went up 3% under Obama.
And when somebody says, like the person you just mentioned, who I'm not going to advertise for, that he's going to bring all these jobs back. Well, how exactly are you going to do that? What are you going to do? There's no answer to it. He just says, well, I'm going to negotiate a better deal. Well, how exactly are you going to negotiate that? What magic wand do you have?
Obama pushed the Democrat Party further and further to the left. He created a new formula where if you were Mexican, Puerto Rican, Asian or black, as long as you weren't white, you could be part of this new coalition, who will vote according to their identity. This was a new idea that worked for Obama and the Democrats. Mass immigration equaled new voters. The downside for the Democrats was they lost the white working class vote, because the push towards identity politics meant they had abandoned their base. After 8 years of Obama, the Democrats lost all political power. They had less political power than in the 1920s. He lost 98 state legislators, 32 governorships, the House, the Senate, and finally the presidency, and also the Supreme Court. China was allowed to challenge America's dominance unimpeded, with its increasingly bullying trade tactics and willful theft of intellectual property.
China's been run during our lifetimes by a communist party that has been much more anti-Western in the past.
Obama overlooked systematic Chinese trade surpluses, flagrant violations of world commercial norms, neo-colonial provocations throughout Asia, stealing US patent and copyrights, product dumping, currency manipulations, and technical appropriations.
You got over 1 billion people, one of the largest economies now in the world, and so it's to be expected that they will want a bigger seat at the table when it comes to international affairs. And what we've said consistently is we welcome the peaceful rise of China, consistent with international norms. That's good for everybody.
Obama was loved abroad, particularly in Europe, but did he strengthen America's position in the world? Obama showed his socialist leanings by reaching out to Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela, whilst alienating old allies like Great Britain and Israel. He alienated their best ally in Britain by saying after the Brexit vote they have to get to the back of the line as they're no more special than any other nation. He sent funds to terrorist groups like Hamas and ISIS while demonizing the only democracies in the region, Israel. North Korea freely pointed nuclear missiles at the West Coast without consequence. He made concession after concession to Iran and got nothing in return. Obamacare caused chaos. Millions lost their coverage and doctors and paid far more in deductibles and premiums. It's also been ruled as unconstitutional. Obama said in 2009, if you like your current plan, you will be able to keep it. Let me repeat that. If you like your plan, you will be able to keep it. But it wasn't true. By the end of Obama's 8-year reign, the intelligence services, civil services, and Washington bureaucracies were out of control. Obama once said, "That's the good thing about being president. I can do whatever I want." But who was really running the show? Attitudes quickly changed when Trump came to office.
He's taking these shots, this antagonism, this taunting to the intelligence community.
You take on the intelligence community, they have 6 ways from Sunday at getting back at you. So even for a practical, supposedly hard-nosed businessman, he's being really dumb to do this.
As a former government official, government's going to kill this guy. He defends Vladimir Putin. Their State Department and CIA officers are coming home. And at Langley and in Foggy Bottom, CIA and State, they're saying, this is how you defend us?
Phil, before, I want to ask you a question, but Phil, just to reiterate, obviously, when you're talking about killing, you're using that as a metaphor. You're not talking about... I just
The press no longer works as a mechanism for holding the president to account, but as a branch of the Democrat Party's PR machine. The left-wing press coverage of Obama was 90% positive on mainstream media outlets. Compare this to Harvard's study. CNN and NBC's Trump coverage was 93% negative.
We could be so much better than we are. Well, and you learn that in journalism school. We're supposed to be middle of the road. That's our job. Now it's just infotainment. That's all it's become. There is no true media news outlet.
So crazy, dog. I mean, no disrespect to CNN because it's who they are now. But when I got this job 13 years ago, CNN was nothing like this.
They were just news, right? Just straight up just news. What is it now?
It's the Trump network, dog. It's like everything is on Trump. They're not even thinking about it. They're not even thinking about anybody else. They sold themselves to the devil.
Senator McCain. President Obama. Boom, baby!
It's hard to differentiate between the Democrat establishment and rhino Republicans. Policies don't change much one way or the other. Obama continued to sell arms to oppressive regimes. He was still against gay marriage in 2008. He prosecuted more whistleblowers than any other president in history. He lost more cases in the Supreme Court than any other president did in the modern era. He knowingly put forward executive orders which were illegal. Whilst accepting money from pharmaceutical companies, Obama voted against the legalization of medical marijuana. Worst of all, Obama targeted his own citizens for execution without charges or due process, far from a war zone. In 2011, a US citizen was killed in a drone attack, and then 2 weeks later his 16-year-old son was killed in a separate drone strike. Not very liberal. Prior to 2009, race was becoming less important. A half-century after the Civil Rights Movement, Americans were increasingly multiracial and welcomed assimilation. Given increasing intermarriage and the frequent inability to calibrate race by superficial appearance, Obama's ascent to presidency seemed to be the ending of America's divide. Instead, America was divided into tribes of white, non-white binaries, and galvanizing the rich and poor against the middle class was Obama's only real legacy. But it's a legacy that has nonetheless fundamentally transformed America.
It's been so black and white, the conversation, and I blame Obama. You know, his 8 years in office did a lot of damage in terms of race relations.
The Obamas are worth 70 times more than when they entered the White House in 2008. The new proud progressive power couple, instead of riding quietly into the sunset, as is the tradition, Obama went down the Clinton route where political influence can be peddled using Michelle Obama, the way Hillary Clinton was. I may never be president again, but my wife can. It is a new form of influence peddling, and unlike many presidents, he remained in Washington. Obama's criticism of Trump whilst president were very unbecoming, and not what I would call presidential. But they were an insight into the man's character. He was petty, vindictive, and shallow. Who says Trump was the first egomaniac in the White House? And in a departure from tradition and decorum, as an ex-president, Obama gave a speech, and in his speech he continued this unsubstantiated accusation of white racism. He called Trump a tin pot dictator. Not very presidential.
I mean, even the Republicans on the other side don't really know what the guy's talking about. They really don't. President Obama will go down as perhaps the worst president in the history of the United States! Exclamation point at real Donald Trump. Well, at real Donald Trump, at least I will go down as a president. Obama out.